Good day. We're going to wait for all the attendees to get logged in. So we'll be starting shortly. Hold on. Okay, the attendee numbers have slowed down. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Lynette Gendreau, who is our director of the subrecipient team. Lynette?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I know it's Friday. Everybody would rather be home instead of listening to a really cruddy contract presentation, but I do think it's important, and I really don't know how to spark this up and make it any more fun. But if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to do my best to get through it as quickly as possible so I'm not wasting any more of your day, but I really, really, truly do think this is important stuff to go through. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off and we're going to get started. Okay, so during the presentation, please feel free to put any questions in the question box, and in between the topics, we're going to go ahead and we'll answer those questions, okay? So the agenda you'll see right here is contracting and reporting. We're going to start with just the contract overview, and then we're going to move into some of the reporting requirements. And I know that you've had lots of individual training on the reporting so far, but I'm hoping I can give a couple little nuggets to help based on some recent questions that we've received. So you are not going to go through the same thing that you've gone through, I promise. Okay, next slide. So the reason I wanted to conduct this training is that I get the impression there was a lot of trust when these contracts were signed. They may not have been read completely for understanding and clarity. Obviously, I want you to trust us, of course, but you need to have a full understanding of what you signed to. You know, what standards are we holding you to per se? I don't want any of this to be a surprise. So I know we're a few months into the contract now, and I just think it's really important that everybody understands what we mean when we reference a certain portion of the contract. So I just kind of wanted to give an overview and make sure everybody understands exactly where we're at. So if we need to refer back to something, if you need me to explain it further, we can do that. Okay, we're going to start here with section 1 on the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to wait, all of these do not have a slide. This is one slide here, and I'm going to go through sections 1 through 11 really quick, okay? So in your contract, section 1, pretty simple. It's who the agreement's between. So this will be our organization throughout the entire contract. So when we talk about your organization where it is referenced, that is on the title page and the header of each page and on the signature blocks. It has to be your legal name. So if you have a doing business as, it's really important that's in there. So take a look, make sure that is correct. Make sure it's the same on the title page as it is on the signature block. Some of those things, there could be an error. We need to make sure that is correct when you're signing it, that you're signing, you know, signing something that actually has the correct name on there. Those are the kind of little things that gets overlooked sometimes. Section 2, specific terms for each program service. This is important on this contract. So, you know, this has a star at the end, the closeout reporting. But on this particular contract, you will see that intake ends 30 days after 90% of the funds available to the homeowner has been reached. The other services are 1 year after execution, unless we terminate earlier for other reasons. So I just feel like this is important to know. We will give you a 30 days notice once we get to that 90%, but I know that there are some people who believe that we do have, you know, a full contract year. that would be great if the funds last that long, but I want to make sure everybody is aware of that statement. I think that's really important. The other statement in there that's important is it outlines TDHCA's obligation to pay out any remaining funds on the contract in 45 days. So specifically, it says department's obligation under this agreement upon the completion of subrecipient's performance shall end 45 calendar days after the agreement term. So if you're doing closeout items and 120 days later, you decide you have an issue, you haven't billed for something, you're past the 45-day window. You need to make sure that you are staying on top of your items, that you have billed correctly. There is a closeout period. There is 45 days. So I want to make sure everybody's aware of that, our obligation under the agreement is to pay for performance only 45 days after the agreement term. Okay, so these are the definitions in section 3. The reason for actually putting these in there, I'm sure most of you are like, oh, we know exactly what these mean, but there are times that we might use them with a different meaning or a different reference or a different interpretation. So if that ever happens throughout our conversation, throughout an email, throughout one of the attachments, the contract definition will always stand. That is the definition that will be used. So if there's ever any question, we go right back here to section 3. Section 4. This section references the exhibits, the the addendums, which outline the performance requirements. That's the laws, the regulations, the policies, the procedures that are going to govern how we're actually going to perform the contract. These were all covered in Wednesday's training, and if you were not able to attend Wednesday's training, we actually did record that, so you'll have a chance to upload that if you want to. Section 5 is TDHCA's obligation to pay you. That's important. And then your obligations to receive payment. So what's important is this section is actual, allowable, and approved costs that are consistent with your specified budget. This is what the auditors will be referring to. Are you billing in accordance with the budget that you submitted? Now, I'm highlighting this because if at any point during the negotiation you updated your budget or your proposal prior to award, those documents need to be updated. Those documents need to reflect your contract, right? So the cover page of your budget, we've noticed, right? And I say this because a lot of these negotiations took place prior to the contract team coming, right? So we've gone through and we're like, oh, well, this budget's only one page. Where's all the backup? So the backup and those breakup pages need to match that cover page. And I feel like we're kind of getting that together now when we've started our new draw process, where we have to line everything out, and we're coming back saying, oh, that shouldn't be there. When we got rid of these counties, we moved this and that there. We need to make sure we clean up all of that paperwork, because that contract needs to match in accordance to how you're billing for the audits. Section 6, how TDHCA will pay you and what stipulations are included, like advancements, reimbursements, and offsets. Please read this thoroughly. This section explains that you have to expend all of your funds before the end of the contract period. Funds expended prior to award or after award, they don't count. They're not allowable. You can't do that. So the expenditure section explains that we will ask for an expenditure plan if it appears the funds will not be expended within the contract period. And I know you've heard me talk about this a time or two, and we're going to help you with that. That's why we have this great team, our program team with Flip and Richard and Laura and Brittany. They come, they sit down, they talk to you, they go over, what's your burn rate, what can we help you with, how can we help you get out there and get more business, because we want to make sure that you're expending those funds. We realize when you're doing the proposal, it's a guess, right? We don't really know how many homeowners are going to come in. We don't really know, what the flow is, who's going to want us, who's going to do it themselves. So we're going to go back. We're going to make sure that we're on track to what we thought we were going to do. And then we'll make the decisions and say, okay, I need a spend plan now, an expenditure plan. We've been doing this for 6 months. Where do you think you're at? Where do you think you're going to be by the end of the contract? So that's what that's covering in section 6. Section 7 is the cost principal requirements of 2 CFR 200. So this is your indirect cost rate or your diminished cost rate from the proposal. So if it was not included in your proposal, it's going to be blank in your contract and it can't be amended now. You can't come back and say, oh, you're right, we do have a 10%. Here's my letter, we do have a 20%. It had to be included in that proposal. We have no more money to give you. So you can move some of your admin funds around to put down there, but there is no more money. If you didn't put it in your proposal, we cannot add it at this time. The audit requirements in accordance with 10 TAC 1.403, section 2262154, and the Texas Code, those are all included here. So these regulations explain that when an audit is required by the dollar value and time frame, how you select an auditor, your rights to audit, all of that. So that's why this portion is really important. You just have to understand your cost principles and how that's going to affect you in an audit. And like, again, that dollar value and time frame. So if you're even subjected to one, based on the value of your contract. Section 8, liability of both parties and payment in the event of termination or suspension. This is in accordance with 10 TAC Chapter 2, so you want to read that. The contract may be terminated for failure to comply with program and contract requirements, rules, or regulations, and corrected deficiencies and fraud, waste, and abuse. This section also discusses authorizations to withhold funds. This is something that is like our very last resort. If the contract gets off track, we're going to work with you. We're going to do everything we can to get back on track. This is like a contract manager's worst nightmares to have to go through that. It's not good for you. It's not good for the customer. It's not good for us. So, but it has to be in here because there are times it takes place, right? So that's kind of what this is. So kind of read that and understand it and make sure we're all following the rules. Section 9, must maintain all supporting documentation to support payment under the program. And I know I've beaten this like a dead horse, but must have written policies and procedures for program, record keeping, and retention. And this is found in 2 CFR 200. And understand that all documentation is subject to open record requests. So that's kind of important as well. I want to point out especially this one particular statement in here that says, shall maintain fiscal and programmatic records and supporting documentation for all expenditures made under this agreement. So we've said this before, I don't require that. Our contract does not require you submit those every month, but the contract requires that you have them. So I want to make sure everybody's aware, just because I don't see them, because you don't give them to me, I can ask for them at any time. The contract can ask for them. The auditors can ask for them, so they have to be there. Those expenditures that validate those funds you're charging have to be available. So I highlight this because there has been a misunderstanding, and I mentioned this again Wednesday, that administrative fees are like a fixed fee, that was all my administrative costs that I put in the proposal, I get to bill that out at a certain amount each month, and it's 100%. And that is not true. I get it, it may be. I mean, you may have fixed costs and they're going to be the same every single month because none of that ever changes. It's not very likely, but it could happen. But you would have to have validation for all of those costs, right? So I want to make sure everybody is doing right so they don't have to lose any money, that nothing happens. So I just try to hit that home to make sure we all are keeping our records according to the way we're supposed to. Okay, section 10. Reporting outlines the types of reports that are required under this contract. So that's all it does, is just kind of list them out, which you guys know. And then section 11 is the process for changes or amendments to your contract. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now we're gonna go over sections 12 through 22. Okay, section 12, it identifies what is and what is not considered program income, as well as the disposition of program income that is earned. And all of this is in accordance with 2 CFR 200.307, so you can go and look at this and reference it, and it's in the contract there. The only example that really comes to my mind when I think of this is we have several vehicles that are on this contract. And so at the end of the contract, we've already determined the disposition for these vehicles. Is they're going to be sold by you. You're going to return that additional funds back to us. So there's a little formula that goes along with that. But the reason that I say that is you can't keep the vehicle and you can't keep those funds together. So that way you would be making a profit. You would be keeping program income. The program purchased those vehicles. They belong to the program. So if we were just to let you have the vehicle at the end with nothing, we're giving you away program funds. Therefore, you're actually getting program income, earned income. Same thing if we let you just sell it and keep that profit without giving the fair share back to the program. So that's kind of what that discusses there. I'm sure there's a million other examples, but that's the one that kind of comes to my head that I think we can relate to this program. Section 13. This is where the program team comes in, my favorite people. This section explains about the on and off site monitoring to ensure efficiency, economy, and efficacy of performance to provide technical guidance. They provide guidance, explain rules of the program, provide direction for success. And I'm telling you, I have never been on I've been doing this for 30 years, 32 years. I have never been on a contract that does it as well as we do here, that takes the time. It's not just the on-site, it's the weekly calls, the really being readily available for all the time. So I would really take advantage of that you guys have it now, because it would do nothing but help you for future programs, honestly. So again, not only they explain the rules and the programs, but they're giving so much to make sure, helping you with the outreach and giving you the ideas for marketing and those kind of things. So that's in this section. And it is in the contract, but I really think that our guys go above and beyond on that, and I appreciate it. So section 14. This identifies the subrecipient as an independent contractor rather than employee of the agency. So this means, to the extent authorized by law, TDHCA is indemnified against third-party actions connected to the service under the agreement. So you do something unlawful, that's on you. TDHCA is not responsible for those actions. Section 15, this is important. Please read and understand 10 TAC 1.404, 2 CFR .200A. I explained this in Wednesday's training. Subrecipient shall comply with these points I just said, those agreements, and all applicable state and local laws, regulations, and ordinance for making procurements. I know, again, I'm beating a dead horse, but the reason this is important to me is in an audit, I don't want them to come to you and say, where's your 3 bids for this? Where is your price comparison? Where did you go to the most, the valued vendor, the most economic? Oh, that went to your brother Joe. You have to make sure you have it documented, that you followed the procedures that you needed to, that you got price comparisons, those type of things. So I remember early in my procurement days when I was actually purchasing and not contracting, that somebody asked me for these goggles for work. So I got them the goggles they wanted, and I did my price comparison for the goggles they wanted. And then my contracting officer came and she said, why did you get those goggles? Those are the one they wanted, for this welding work they were doing. She goes, why that brand? And that's the brand they asked for, but I did a price comparison. And the first thing she said was, there are other brands that are less expensive, that do the same thing. It's not just price. There's a whole lot of things you need to look at. And I'm like, oh, okay. They said a brand, I got the brand, I did my price comparison, I thought it was done. There's a lot more to it than that in the purchasing. So I want to make sure that we understand that by looking at those, so you don't get snagged like I did. Okay, section 16. Provide the oversight requirements for sub-grants. Now this only applies right now to one of our subrecipients who actually is sub-granting, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Section 17. In this slide, I've included the exact reference for the travel requirements because they are not intuitive. When you go to the comptroller site, you do 2 CFR 475 is going to outline it. You use this reference, it's going to take you there. But in the contract, it says go to the comptroller, and it literally took me like 5 minutes to find out where I needed to go. So I'm trying to make this a little easier for you there. So Section 18, fidelity bond in accordance with 10 TAC. If the amount of the fidelity bond is not prescribed in the contract, the fidelity bond must be for a minimum of $10,000 or an amount equal to the contract if the contract is less than $10,000. So I know we haven't really talked about that when we were doing our contracts. We don't specify an amount in there. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of your requirement for the fidelity bonds in your contract. Okay. Section 19. Subrecipient is required to have current and adequate insurance coverage and will notify TDHCA immediately if that coverage is suspended or canceled. Self-explanatory there. Section 20. TDHCA will be notified if a claim or action regarding your performance or your subcontractor's performance on this contract is filed. Again, even if we are not liable for your performance, we still need to know about it in case it does like get into the media, something that could affect us in any way. So you do need to let us know. Section 21, you have the legal authority to enter into this agreement. You are a subrecipient in accordance with 501c3. The signature on this contract is of a person who has the right to execute the contract. That's super important. TDHCA's right to terminate, subrecipient's liability to terminate, and the consequences of mergers, defaults, other events that could affect your good standing with the state of Texas. So we do check that before we, let somebody have a contract. Before we award it, it goes through this whole vetting process to make sure you're in good standing. But we also understand that good standing could change within a year or two that you're on the contract. So that's your responsibility to let us know if any of those things happen. Okay, Section 22. In addition to federal, state, and local laws and regulations, you must comply with the State Act, the ARP Act, Section 3206, and the Fair Housing Laws. So this section covers many laws, most of which, again, we reviewed Wednesday, but I do want to highlight a couple of things that we did not discuss. Now, one is the Limited English Proficiency Plan. Now, that was in the NOFA. That is a requirement, but we didn't ask to see your plan. We just said you had to have one. So you need to make sure that it is in compliance with those laws and those regulations, right? It can't just be, I will have people who speak a different language. It has to be, there is a plan, there is a requirement that outlines the requirements for those plans. And that's with the Executive Order 13166. And this is the big one for us right now. The organization, as you know, is rewriting our ISPA, our Information Security and Privacy Agreement. So everyone signed it, and I don't know that everybody understood the requirements in it. Read it, fully understand it. It outlines the requirements for an IT security policy, what has to be in that policy, the security measures that you have to have in place to connect to our network, the security measures for maintenance of our protected information, TDHCA's protected information, the responsibility to provide IT security training to all of your employees, and what has to be included in that training, how often it has to be provided, those type of things, how it's documented for compliance, and the requirement to provide background checks on all of your employees. So that's a lot of information and a lot of requirements in that ISPA. Again, you need to make sure that you understand what you signed up for that. And especially because you're gonna, I'm sure you all are gonna go on to do other contracts as well. And I wanna make sure, you write the plan once, you write it right, and it's good to go. Okay, Section 23 will be on our next slide. We'll move forward. Section 23 to Section 33. I promise you we're almost done. I'm sorry, I know this is a lot. Okay, Section 23, compliance with Section 321.022 of the Texas Government Code on Reporting Waste, Fraud, and Abuse, and the requirement for establishing procedures for this, of course. You have to give the department, us, TDHCA, complete access to all those records and the employees, the agency, when there's monitoring, investigating. And you cannot discriminate against employees who do make a report. And if you have any questions on this or you need any advice, oh my gosh, Lizette is amazing. And I know that she would be happy to help you, give you advice, maybe give you a template on writing something for your organization, some kind of a policy. So let me know if you need anything on that. We really do have the best here. Lizette's amazing. So section 24 states you will not employ undocumented workers who are not lawfully admitted for permanent residence in the United States. Section 25, requirement to have a conflict of interest policy consistent with 2 CFR 200.318, as well as maintaining written standards. What constitutes a conflict of interest, the requirements to comply with the laws of the conflict of interest, what your organization does not to have a conflict of interest with this program. So, you're certifying you have all that, you don't have a conflict with us, how you handle those conflicts. So that's a whole written procedure in itself as well. Section 26, acknowledging that program funds will not be used for political polling or other activities or legislative influence or any type of lobbying. Section 27, requirements for maintaining an organization that is non-discriminatory, equal opportunity, meets the accessibility and fair housing requirements, and all of those regulations that are governed included in this section, right? Reasonable accommodations and age discrimination are also included under Section 27. Section 28, although your organization is checked through SAMS, we do that again, that's part of our vetting process. This section lays all of that out in Addendum C, which requires your confirmation that you will comply with the requirements of the applicable regulations regarding being debarred, suspended, ineligible, being an ineligible organization, or if your organization gets debarred or excluded during this process. So even though we check it, again, things happen during the term of a contract. So we need to make sure that if something happens in regarding this, you have cited Addendum C that says you'll let us know, you're not currently debarred. So that's what Section 28 does. It kind of references Addendum C that says make sure you know this, that you're going to sign that. Section 29, the only special requirement here is for the direct deposit. It says that that's how we're going to pay you. I've only done one instance where we had to make an exception to that, and oh my goodness, it was not a fun process. So in a rare instance, we could issue a check as an emergency, but it's not a good process. So that is our special requirement, is that you have to have direct deposit. Section 30. This is an outline of the rights or remedies given to the department along with sovereign immunity. Section 31 maintains there are no oral agreements. All binding agreements are in writing and listed in the contract. So I bring this is so important to me. This includes coverage areas. So make sure your contract is accurate. And I bring this up again because we were talking about earlier at the very beginning of this presentation, sometimes some negotiations were made before the contract was written to get within range, to make sure we were meeting, the requirements here for coverage areas and those type of things. And if the paperwork wasn't written correctly, the things weren't updated, maybe those service areas were not right. And you're going to be held accountable to what is in that contract. So even if it was a typo on our part, if we listed 20 service areas and you signed it, you're responsible for those 20 service areas. We're going to do the right thing, obviously, but we need to make sure it's correct. We need to make sure that what it says in that contract is what you're getting paid to do. It's what you agreed to do. That's really important because, again, an auditor is going to come in and that's what they're going to look for. Show me where you've done work in all of these counties that you said you're going to do work in. So that is so important. Let me see. I lost my place here. No oral agreements. Okay, Section 32. If one part of the contract is invalid, the rest of the contract remains valid. Section 33. If anything is copyrighted under this agreement, TDHCA has royalty-free, non-exclusive rights, but we don't have anything like that for this contract. Okay, Section 34 through 45. Okay. Program funds cannot pay the salary to employees who use alcoholic beverages while on duty or pay for alcohol in any form. So that's section 34. 35, program funds must benefit persons of all religious affiliations, cannot be used explicitly for religious or worship activities. Section 36, force majeure, covers adjustments to delays caused by circumstances beyond your control, and those reasons are listed within that section as well. Section 37, the contract cannot be assigned to another organization without the consent of the department. Now, I've only experienced this twice in my contracting career where there was a merger, there was a sell, and we weren't notified. And I don't know that this would happen with a nonprofit necessarily, but you can't assume that, well, they now own the company, they get all the contracts. That's not how that works, because that company hasn't been vetted, their backgrounds, their all of that. So the agreement was made with that organization, with those owners, so it does not transfer automatically without our knowledge and our permission. So just keep that in mind. Time is of the essence in this instance means if timelines set forth and agreed in the contract are not met, the rights under the contract can be forfeited. So this is due really to the limited availability of our funding, you know, the short timeline that we have. And I realize, you know, we're talking about forfeit and nobody likes that word, but I know we have issues that we have to deal with on our end about, you know, getting the contracts done, getting them written, getting them through legal, getting them to you. That takes time. You have to review them. You have to get them through your legal, through your executives, get them signed. Those things take time. But when we're talking time of the essence, there are things that are within our control. After that, once the contract gets started, we're talking getting set up, getting out there, getting our marketing events, getting our outreach. Those are the things that we really need to get on top of and make sure we're doing, because we're going to run out of funds, or we're going to run out of time on the contract, and you're not going to get this contract for a year when the money runs out, is my point. So we need to ensure we're doing this in a timely manner. Okay, section 39, explanation of acceptable media for signatures and legality. And it mentions faxes, and I thought that was funny because I'm like, does anybody even have a fax anymore? Okay, section 40, masculine gender refers to feminine and masculine, includes both, as well as singular words are considered plural when needed. Section 41, this is the POC for each side of the contract regarding contract changes and notifications. So if there are changes in this, let the contract specialist know. Now, I know you guys are really good at saying, you know, whomever the contract specialist changed or our administrative person changed, but if the person who signed and authorized that contract change, we need to know, because they're the ones who are obligated to that contract, who signed it. They're the ones who said, you know, this is legal and lawful, and they had the authority to bind this. So we need to know, we need to update that, because this is any changes and modifications, they need to be made between these people. So if that signature authority changes, we need to be made aware so we can update the contract accordingly. Section 42, this contract is governed by the laws of Texas with Travis County as the jurisdiction. 43, disputes under this agreement are processed in accordance with Texas Government Code Chapter 2009 and 10 TAC 1.17. Okay, section 44. So we have two contracts now, one that was for our first NOFA and one that was for our second NOFA. So the first NOFA, it has section 44 as limitation on abortion, but in the second contract that was removed. I don't write those contracts. I'm not sure what happened in the rules, the laws, the regulations that removed that or inserted that, but so if it's not in your contract, that's why. If we update the contracts, it will probably be removed out of yours. So section 45, TXHAF application must identify if an applicant is a veteran. Okay, whew, this is the end of the contract. After that, it's, you know, you sign it, you authorize it, and sorry about that, I know that was long. So to the next slide, we're going to talk about just the addendums, and you know, this is pretty quick here. The addendums A, B, and C are the certifications stating that you're going to follow the requirements that you just agreed upon, in the contract, lobbying, drug-free workplace, debarment. The notice that addendum B, those physical addresses required for the places of performance, super important. If those locations change, we need to know, because I believe that's the part of the Drug-Free Work Act. You have to have certain posters and things like that in your physical locations. So if those physical locations change and they come in to do a audit, just a spot check on that, and you're not at that location anymore, that's a big deal. So Exhibit A, that is the contract, seriously. That's the meat of the contract. That says what you're going to do, the terms, the closeout, deliverables, budget, reporting, the service area, benchmark. That's the important stuff, is Exhibit A. So the benchmarks in there are, of course, very important. If funding is not spent in accordance with the benchmarks, it may be deobligated. We've talked about that previously. Exhibit B is the HAF overview to provide guidance for compliant performance. And then finally, Exhibit C are the sample reports. Whew. Okay, Laura, do we have any questions before we go on to the reporting?
We had one regarding, a couple regarding ISPA, and the bottom line they were asking if it's needed for different access to different systems. And the bottom line, as stated on the ISPA webpage, is an ISPA is required for any contractor or entity that enters into a written agreement with the department, that's TDHCA, and all of you have entered into a written agreement with us, so you must have it.
I will tell you, even if you signed one before, because we have a whole list of everybody who signed one, and so our previous guidance was if they've already signed one, they're good, they don't need a new one, although the ISPA has just been updated. So y'all are going to get a whole slew of them again to sign. So if you didn't sign it, if you've signed one previously, it's been years, you're going to get a new one to sign. Just so that's why I'm kind of hitting home on that. It's been a touch point with us here in the organization to make sure that we're following them, we're following up on them, we're making sure that everyone has them and understands them. So that's why I'm talking about it a lot. I apologize for that. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, like I said, but it is important.
And that was it at this point. So I'll let you know if we get any more at the end, okay?
Awesome. Okay, let's go into reporting. So we're gonna, things to track outside of the reports, the required reports, and the draw request. Okay, we can go to the first slide here. All of these items are requirements of the NOFA and the contract. They are not tracked in your monthly report, but they are required and may be reviewed in a site visit, monitoring, compliance audit. Some of these factors will also be used in consideration for the final drawdown. So it's good to keep on top of this information to know where you're standing on reports, budget, meeting timelines, meeting contractual service agreements. There is a, I'm sorry, I'm losing my place here. There is a confusion on our quarterly report. I believe that's the next slide. We're on this, I guess I can go over this little by little. Compliance with the proposal. So we're talking about all of these things being within your NOFA and the proposal, but I'm sorry, with your contract. But the timelines required in the NOFA and submitted in the proposal, compared actuals, openings within 30 days of the contract award. Proposed budget to actuals, expending 25%. This is what I'm talking about that's so important. Our services conducted as outlined in the proposal, the locations, this is everything we've talked about, but what I'm saying is these are not in your monthly report. They're still reportable, they're still important, there's still things you need to know. Our process is in place to determine eligibility, manage records, those type of things. So I don't feel like I need to go over all of them, but that's where I still think that it's important for you guys to make sure you look at this, you know it, you're in compliance. Okay, next slide. So required reports that are inside the contract. So the expenditure report, the supplemental report, the quarterly report is where I feel like there's a little hiccup on, and it probably wasn't explained well in the beginning. I'll be real honest, I'll own that. The quarterly report is due 2 months after the end of each quarter. So it is a cumulative of that quarter. So there is a quarterly report and there's a quarterly narrative, two separate things. The performance report is submitted like any other monthly report, except it has all the data for that quarter. You fill it out completely the same, except for those top 3 lines where it says monthly year and monthly spend. You ignore all that and you just put the quarterly spend. Another thing is you don't need a running total. So only complete the numbers for that current quarter. If you're in quarter 3, I don't need quarter 1 and quarter 2. I just need the data for quarter 3. So that's what we're doing for that. And then the narrative, when you're submitting that quarterly, you attach that narrative as you would your supplemental report. And the narrative has sections like issues, concerns that you've had, problems you've encountered. It doesn't have to be with every item with like outreach and intake and legal. We're in general. We're talking in general. It doesn't have to be super detailed. We're doing that to help you to find out if there's ways that we can improve the process, things we can do to maybe refine some of the things we're asking for, or we can maybe interject. So that's what those narratives are about, so that we can help out. Okay. The next slide, please. Draw request. I know y'all hate this. A draw request is submitted to receive your reimbursement expenses from the previous month. Request in advance, or request a draw for the project cost. So we've already gone through this in detail. I'm not going to do that. What I want to point out is the first tab of this are the instructions. Read them, look at them. If you have a question about them, let us know. But I really think that a lot of the questions and the confusion would be answered by looking at that, by looking at that first page on the instructions. So you go to the next slide. This is your tab 1. We've tried to break it down where it says, what's the budget category mean? What's the beginning balance? What the, we've tried to put those instructions in each one, what would go in each category. We took a lot of time to try to figure out what is the best way to present this. And this is kind of what we came up with. And the next slide really is just the same thing. It's just, it went all fit on one page. So, I'm not saying it's the best way, but it's the best way we came up with trying to help you guys. So just kind of look at that when you're doing your draw, and see if that helps you kind of get through it a little bit. I know it's a little bit confusing. And so before I end this, if anybody's still awake, I did want to tell you that we do have another contract specialist starting on May 8th. Now, I can't hear the groanings, but they're probably out there. Another change, I know, but it's happening on all sides. It's not just ours. The reason that we're doing this, we need another contract specialist. I think a lot of the delays in payment and supplementals and just burnout is because 2 people handling 34 contracts is a lot. So breaking that up into 3, I think it's really, you're going to get a lot more detail and attention from your contract specialist that way. But I'm also not just, ripping a Band-Aid off and saying, here you go, here's Linda. The contract specialists are going to work with Linda for 2 weeks to, get her in there, teach her the contracts that she's given. So if you're one of the 11 who are going to have a new contract manager, it's not going to be painful. You're going to be introduced to them slowly to the weeklies. You're going to get her information, and she's been in contracting, I think, for 18 years, 16 years in state contracting. She knows exactly what she's doing. So we're really excited to have her on board, and I really think she's going to help us get things moving a little faster, so you guys can get the dedicated attention you need from each of your contract specialists. And I know that was long. I know it wasn't very interesting, but I think it was needed. So who do you contact? Here's just the contact information. You should have it, but just so you have it again, contact me whenever you need. My information should be on practically anything. My phone number is on my email, so call me, email me whenever you need. Other than that, I am done, unless you guys have some questions.
There are a few.
All
So
right, yeah.
one question is, we operate mobile intake sites. Are we required to post drug-free notices on mobile locations?
Ooh, I'll have to get back with. I don't know that. I
Yes.
want to say yes,
Yes.
but I don't want to
Yes.
talk without clarifying.
I know that in weatherization, when they have vehicles, they have to have it posted on their vehicles. So,
Okay. Yeah, I would say my gut said yes, but okay.
okay. And then let me get to the next one. They were asking about a copy of the slides and the recording. And yes, part one is already posted on the TXHAF website under the training videos with the recording and the slides. And part two will get posted on that same site by Monday. And then for clarification, the report still needs to be approved by your contract specialist before inputting into HCS.
That was someone was asking that.
Yes. Does it have to
Okay.
be approved before submitting it to housing contract
So,
system?
okay, that is not a requirement. Actually, I had this on there, must have skipped over my notes. That is not a requirement, but it sure is helpful because once you submit it, they can't change it. If you put it in HCS and you save it and then let them know, they can review it. And if there's any edits or any questions, it can be corrected right there on their side or your side, and then it can be submitted. It's going to save a lot of time. I believe if they have to reject it, it takes one full day before you can get in and access it. So that really delays the whole process. So a quick email, phone call, something that says, hey, I've got this saved, it's ready. Because we don't get notified electronically if it's saved, only if it's submitted. So when you get it ready, save it, email, call, text, whatever. Hey, Sean, I got this ready. Can you look at it? And then she can look at it, go over, ask any questions, make any corrections right there with you. Get on a Teams, walk through it. It's going to make it a lot easier for you guys. Not a requirement, but it is easier.
Okay. Give me 1 second. We love LaShondra. She has been phenomenal.
I agree.
we have to just share that. Yes, she is. Okay.
I'm going to throw myself under the bus here. Sean did not have a lot of contracting experience. And I was like, oh my goodness, really? She has been a gem. I'm like, you know, that hidden gem you didn't really know you needed until you got her. And I'm like, she has been amazing. I'm so glad that, yeah, we got her.
Yeah.
She's great.
Is there any chance the housing counseling will be extended into 2024, or is it just dependent on when the intake monies run low?
So there are two different things. The intake money is separate from the legal and the housing money. So the intake money is determined on the funds, when the funds run out for the homeowners. And the money that's for the housing and the legal will continue until it's run out. So I don't know if there's enough to go to 2024. I was told off the cuff, we're all guessing, we don't know, that it would probably be July, August of 2023. I'm sorry, yeah, you're right, 2024. Next August 2024.
Okay. I think we've answered all of them. Just double checking. Yes, that's it.
Okay, it's a Friday. I know it's hard. It's right before lunch. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And again, if there's any other thing you want, anything I can help you with, any training, let me know. We're here for you. Glad to help.
Thanks, Lynette.
All right. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you all.